I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin here from What's Your Work Fit? I hope you're having a good and successful day today. We've got a great show. We're going to get to it momentarily. But before I get to that, I just want to offer my gratitude to all of you who are a part of the What's Your Work Fit community. To anyone new who's just joining us today, I do have a few asks. First of all, I ask that you engage with What's Your Work Fit on the platform or platforms of your choice. We have two. We're on LinkedIn Live, where most of our viewers are. We're also on the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to us there. And actually, that's a great experience in terms of going back and watching past shows and video clips and so forth. Next up, I want to point you to our fairly new What's Your Work Fit Substack. This is all-in-one shopping, if you will. Every asset that we have, live and recorded videos and clips in our audio podcast, and an archive of all of our written content you can find right here. And you can subscribe for free at dansmolin@substack.com. One last thing I want to say is, if you haven't done so already, please tell 5 friends to subscribe to What's Your Work Fit on the platforms of their choice. This is how we're going to build and to extend our community. And again, thank you so much for helping to make this show, this community, if you will, a reality. Okay, I want to get to our guest right away. She is our returning guest, Jessica Weiss. How are you, Jessica?
Hello. Thank you for having me, Dan.
You are welcome. I am so thrilled to bring you back. And let me tell you a little bit about Jessica. She is a world-recognized happiness expert who helps companies leverage tangible, research-based strategies to create happier workers and workplaces. Also, she is a brand new author of Happiness Works, The Science of Thriving at Work. Tell us about the book, when it comes out, and the origin story behind it, if you will.
Well, the book comes out on November 11th. It is available everywhere that you can buy books, and it's available for pre-sale right now. And my publisher, as well as I, would greatly appreciate any and all pre-sales. So it's pretty easy to find. The origin story of the book is interesting because I never thought that I would write a book. You know, I just was kind of doing my work and enjoying my work. And someone approached me, a publisher, Wiley, and asked if I ever thought about writing a book. And I was like, who, me? Who are you talking to? So apparently they were talking to me. And it was a super tough experience. And Dan, you and I chatted about this. Writing a book is not easy, but I'm really glad I did it. And I'm already kind of starting to think about what's the next one.
I am so thrilled. You know, I wrote my book 14 years ago. I wrote the first 12,000 words in the family room of my late in-laws' house in Manhasset, New York, over a 2-day weekend. I was left alone with my dog and I banged it out.
That's amazing.
And that book was in me. I don't know. I've been asked to write more books. Unfortunately, the the place that I'm in right now in terms of future of work is so changeable that the minute I wrote something, it would
Yeah.
have to be amended. So I say good on you, Jessica. I wish you the greatest success with your new book. Very good. Let's get to our topic today. And we want to ask you, what's the science behind workplace happiness? Yeah, I turned you into a cartoon figure, but that was fun. So
Okay,
what
looks
what
good.
what's going on right now scientifically that's informing the work that you do about helping people to achieve better bliss, better happiness, better
Yeah.
contentment in the workplace?
Yeah. So at this point now, we have now got decades, which is actually really interesting, of
Mm,
research about what is happiness at work. And we've got a lot of objective data. I feel like this is oftentimes thought of as a qualitative conversation instead of a quantitative conversation. And with all of this research, we now have a good amount of data to back it up. And my favorite piece of data, quite honestly, comes out of Oxford University. And that's the one that says that organizations that view themselves or where the employees view themselves as more content, satisfied, engaged, happy, if you will,
yeah.
perform the S&P 500, which is
Wow.
a fantastic statistic that I love to bring out to every pessimist in the room. But that is really where we're at. We're at a point now where we're getting objective markers that when companies and organizations value happiness, whether it's on teams, whether it's for individuals or throughout the organization, it truly affects the bottom line.
I have been following Gallup research on workplace engagement now probably for the past 15 years. And I checked where it was for mid 2025. Disengagement is now at 68%, 6-8.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
You got a tall order.
Yeah,
If
I'm not surprised. Um, well, look at kind of what's happening externally, right? If
right,
we look at just in the United States, if we look at the external environment, it's an environment of uncertainty, which is certainly an antagonistic force to happiness, right? We have mass layoffs, you have the government shutdown. It's probably the worst job market it's been in decades.
right.
So, to be frank, I'm not surprised that those disengagement numbers are where they are.
You know, it is a different job market in that um, people are not necessarily getting fired en masse. I mean, you have to set aside the federal sector because that's not reflective of the private sector necessarily. But what we're seeing is people aren't getting laid off, they're not getting fired, they're also not getting hired the way that they used to.
Right.
So that's a different kind of uncertainty that has to impact one's own contentment. I'd have to believe.
Yeah, well, I mean, the big thing that I talk about in the book, and a big personal belief of mine is that a huge component of happiness is autonomy, right? It's having
Mm,
control over it. It's having agency. It's having the ability to make the choices that drive your happiness. And I think that that's particularly critical in times like these where everything is kind of uncertain. And I lay out a 5-step framework in the book for what will lead to happiness at work. Truthfully, those things also lead to happiness in life. So one ripples into another and cascades over. But it's not the same for everybody. Everybody's definition of happiness is not the same.
mhm.
So I like to say that here's the buffet, right? I'm giving you the buffet. You decide what you want to choose and what works for you. And that's really kind of, it's really an issue of control and choice and you being able to decide where your happiness lies. And it's also a question of time, right? At certain
Right.
points in your life, maybe your happiness is here, and at another point in life, you're getting happiness from something else. So it's really, it's for me, a big component of it is this autonomy and self-control.
I would imagine happiness by cohort is an interesting view. If you are younger, perhaps your contentment or happiness would be based on the fact that I have access to people who can help me work better, who can
Mhm,
help me learn the job, who can help me get through the stuff that goes on in this organization. And
mhm,
added to that, the fact that we're in a distributed workplace. So I may not be in the same room with my mentor.
mhm,
Take that and contrast that with somebody who's perhaps a Gen Xer.
mhm,
They are, maybe past the pinnacle of their career, and maybe they're thinking about, what am I going to do after I do this?
mhm,
And they're singing the song, "Is That All There Is?" And
mhm,
fortunately, there's more that people can do that they haven't thought about, that they
mhm.
haven't liberated themselves to do. What are your thoughts on the contrasts of the generations in the workplace?
Well, for the first time, we have five generations in the workplace, right? So you have everything from Gen Z all the way up to baby boomers. So it's
Mhm.
actually a really interesting time in terms of understanding cross generations on teams, right? So that breaks down into how people communicate, what people expect out of work, how they behave, dress at work. It goes deep and it goes superficially. But I think it's a really interesting time. And to be frank,
Mm,
I think it's a beautiful thing
mm,
because for me, as someone who has a background in management consulting, I always look at things from the perspective of I like to get different points of view.
yeah.
And what could even be better than having five different generations working together on one team in terms of generating creativity and innovation and all of that? So I actually think it's a very special time. And I think it's something and I'm hoping that this is sort of the new way forward, that we can all understand how to work together, because I think it's really a key to happiness.
So I agree with you. And I want to bring up, before we went live, I was telling you about what we do on the weekends. And my wife and I pop up our vintage clothing store. And not this past weekend, but the weekend before, we happened to be at a brewery in a nice part of Northern Virginia. And in the store next to ours was a young woman, probably in her late 20s. And she was telling me about her her work in the corporate sector in Washington, D.C. And she says that she reckoned with the fact that she was not getting all the creative sources out of the work that she had hoped. I said, "So what did you do about it?" She goes, "You're looking at it. I
Right,
decided to side hustle the weekend
right,
and sell beautiful things."
right.
And so I see a lot of that bubbling up, certainly from the younger cohorts in the marketplace. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Well, I think that they've redefined flexibility, right? So
Mm,
because they were sort of coming of age, and continue to come of age. But
mm,
let's just say that the past 5 years have been a bit chaotic in the workplace, right? We had the pandemic, we had the work from home, we have the crazy return to office, we have hybrid working. It's just none of it is the same as it used to be. And I think that what they have really tapped into is this idea of flexibility, and how flexibility is a key to happiness. And what I love about the story that you said, and
yeah,
really goes back to what I said at the beginning, is that you are the driver of your own happiness. So while her corporate job probably fulfills a number of things that she needs, including very basic needs like the ability to pay her rent and the ability to put food on the table, which I am by no means being
yeah.
cavalier about. That's an important part of this equation. But she realizes that she needed that creativity and she's not going to get it from her work. So she created it. And that idea, that how do you create your dream job, how do you create happiness at work, is like the integral message of what I say. I always say dream jobs are created, they are not given. You're not going to find a dream job, you're going to create it. And that's effectively what she did.
Sally, if you're watching, she's a new viewer, and I think she joined the What's Your Work Fit community. So I hope you enjoyed that answer. I haven't heard it from you, Jessica, but I've heard the term portfolio career
Mhm.
quite often. And I think having a portfolio moment in your career like Sally has, she got the corporate job, it's remunerative, it pays well, it's not overly creative as she'd hoped. So she figured out how to create beauty in her work that makes her happy. Not everybody who side hustles is at that level. So if you don't have to side hustle to put food on the table, and unfortunately in my area, a lot of people are doing that right now. But if you don't have to do that, where do you go with your introspection, if you will, to say, well, what could I do that would make me happy?
Right. So in my book, I have a 5-step framework to happiness at work. And I've broken it down to 5 steps that I have found through 15 years of research, interviewing thousands of people, throughout all kinds of organizations, startups to Fortune 500. And for me, it breaks down to these 5 things. So it's connection, trust, progress, strategic optimism, and resilience. And if you can access those 5 things, and each of those are teachable skills, it's not things that we're born with, it's things that once you put intentionality behind it, you can create it. And if you can access those 5 things, you will find more happiness at work. Happiness at work and happiness in life does not happen by accident. You don't bump into it. You create it. You build it. And you need to tap into the things that really drive it. Now, I said that those are those 5 things. So across the board, connection and friendship is probably the most important one. And I would say that probably applies to every single human being walking on the planet. But strategic optimism is one that I particularly love, because I love the idea of moving through life with optimism, but I'm also fiercely against the notion of toxic positivity.
Right.
So I think that that's a really important step on the framework that I love to lean into. But all of these all together, so whether it's trust and resilience and connection, all of those pieces all together create that overall framework that will lead you to more happiness at work.
I think I'm going to adopt strategic optimism.
It's a good one.
I really do think so, because it aligns with the tagline in all my posts, which is our best days lie ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about acknowledging that there are problems, facing them head on, but more importantly, understanding that there's a solution, right? That we can find the solution. And that's what I love about it. The science behind optimism is insane. I mean, people who are optimistic live 7 to 10 years longer than people who aren't. That one alone is a reason to be optimistic.
I've had a long career, and in my corporate life, when I was in the ad agency space, I always did best when the economy was in trouble. Why? Because the clients were coming to us to solve their problems. So I had the creative opportunities, I had the remunerative opportunities. But what I learned from all that is that things, bad stuff can be overcome. Sure. with a good attitude and what you're calling strategic optimism.
Yeah.
And let's bring it to present day. Things are feeling very wobbly right now in our world for reasons I don't have to get into. I think everybody knows. Having that central belief of strategic optimism, I have to believe, is central to sustaining workplace happiness.
Yes. It is. I believe it is. That's why I love it so much. But again, this goes back to that buffet idea, right? So for me, that belief in optimism, whether you call it strategic optimism or practical optimism, I just kind of like to differentiate between that and this idea that, everything's going to be fine and you don't have to worry about it. That's not what we're talking about at all. It's just this notion that problems can be solved and things will get better. So for me, I take a double portion of strategic optimism because I love that one. Like that one really sings to me and really resonates to me. And to be frank, it's probably because by nature, I think I might be a bit pessimistic and I have to fight that in myself, right? And I find that when I lean into the optimism, it kind of washes over me and I'm like, okay, it's possible, it's fixable. It also goes hand in hand with resilience, which I talk about as a muscle that needs to be built. So, the resilience, the strategic optimism, it all kind of comes together as one really strong component.
So I'm thinking about my own mother. She's about to turn 96. She was a depression baby. She was born in 1930, right at the head end of the Depression. Went through a lot of really difficult stuff, but was one of the most positive, forward-thinking people. She always thought, there will be a better day. Things will get better. If I was having a bad day when I was a little kid, Danny, it will get better. I promise you, it will get better. And she was right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not like this has just been invented. This was a coping mechanism for people going through the 20th century.
Yeah, and it's free. It costs nothing at all.
Costs nothing at all. Can we talk about the toxic positivity?
Yeah.
Gosh, I haven't talked to you about it, but I've experienced enough of it in my career, chapters, if you will, both from clients, but also on the work, at the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
How does one overcome that?
Yeah.
How does one counter it?
Yeah. Well, the big thing about toxic positivity is it actually undermines happiness, right? And the number one way that it undermines happiness, and this goes back to the 5-step framework in the book, is it takes away trust, right? Because if you see what's patently obvious before your eyes, right? It's a problem. There's an elephant in the room, whatever it is. And your leader or your colleague, whomever it is answering you with one of these very empty platitudes. A, you no longer trust them. And B, their words become meaningless to you, right? So the only way that I know how to deal with toxic positivity, the answer is strategic optimism, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, everything about toxic positivity lies in opposition to strategic optimism. So it's this idea that everything's going to be okay. It's all going to work out. Well, wait a second. Let's actually acknowledge what is the problem, what is not working. And then let's talk about how difficult it's actually going to be to solve it, and that it might take us a number of times to do it. Let's acknowledge what we know and what we don't know. And then you're now building trust. You're building resilience, and you're confronting the problem with a realistic set of beliefs that actually lands you in an optimistic place instead of this nonsensical toxic positivity. So my answer to toxic positivity is strategic optimism.
And I would imagine, as a management consultant, after you were able to create a more positive happiness frame, you can go to your clients and say, you see that? You see you see the cause and effect?
Right.
I think that's probably the only way to learn it, right?
No, absolutely. And, that's why I always rely on the science and the research, because oftentimes, just merely saying something is not going to get those cynics across the finish line. But I always rely back on the science and the research to boost it.
Ann Barr Thompson couldn't make the show today, but she submitted a question and asked, made a comment, if you will, if or when workplace happiness becomes practice, not program, trust grows. That's it. That was kind of interesting to me. I would imagine that a lot of HR managers, people managers, still treat the aspirational things as programming, as opposed to enmeshed practical steps to create a more trusting workplace. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, trust is one of my frameworks, one of the steps in the framework, and it's a critical step. And I think really what's important about trust is this idea of psychological safety, right? So that is where trust begins. And when I talk about psychological safety, it's this idea that you can make mistakes at work, things can go wrong, and there's no fear of retribution. There's no fear of punishment. Mm-hmm. So once you have that baseline where it's okay to mess up, people have the expectation that we are going to mess up and we are going to learn from our mistakes. That's how you start to build trust. So in addition to doing what you say and saying what you are going to do, all of those things, of course, are critical components. But the most important component of trust, which is one of the 5 steps to workplace happiness, is this idea of psychological safety.
One of the things that excites me about where the modern workplace is headed is actually a process that I think is rooted in pre-industrial age craft guilds, which is we embrace our mistakes. When things blow up, we cheer because we're going to learn stuff, right? something happened in the industrial age where perfect was the goal and you were
Yeah.
never supposed to make mistakes. I think we messed up a lot of people with that belief.
Yeah.
But we're back to iteration.
Yep.
And I don't have a question here. It's just an observation that I feel that not only will processes get improved, but our interpersonal engagement will get improved because we will learn from, you know what, I saw that I did that, and
Yeah.
I got the nonverbal. Okay, I'll know better next time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's that idea of psychological safety. I mean, Google was looking throughout their organization about what drives the most successful teams.
Yeah,
And they looked at sales teams, which is like black and white, right? It's
yeah,
numbers, there's no denying what's actually going on. And what they found was the most significant driver of success on teams was this idea of psychological safety, which is exactly what you just said, the ability to make mistakes, right? And not have to pay a price. And with that comes better trust in and amongst each other, better social connection, all of it. It all cascades over into one another.
you know, my happiness or lack thereof early in my career as an individual contributor who had and did not have staff was the fear of failure. And you know, current me looks back and says, I wish I hadn't been like that. But I understood it because the the processes in place were designed for that. They weren't designed for me to learn and get better through iteration. We also didn't operate in team settings very much like we do now. And I think the team, what I often call the hive, uh, feels often just like we're on a level playing field, even with people who might be our boss or somebody who may be below us in station, if you will. Once you're on that team, everybody's got an integral part to creating a happy outcome. Are you seeing some of that?
Well, I think this idea of psychological safety is becoming more and more mainstream. I don't think it's just like a crazy hypothesis. I think that
Yeah.
it's something that organizations are understanding as being essential. And I think that once it becomes more and more mainstream, I think that that hive notion
Yeah.
will play out more and more.
I want to get to Helena, who wrote, "We all strive for happiness, but should that be the ultimate goal?" I didn't know how to answer this question. I thought it was interesting and one that I would probably cogitate on for a while. But maybe happiness is the through line to just better outcomes. You,
I think that we can get into like a whole semantic game of like, is it happiness? Is it contentment? Is it satisfaction? I don't know.
yeah,
I think that it's kind of a silly exercise. For me, yeah, I think happiness is the ultimate goal because what else is there?
yeah, yeah. I mean, you
Right?
want
I
to,
mean, I just, for me, yeah, it is the ultimate goal. And whether you call it satisfaction, contentment, whatever it is, engagement, I don't care what you call it. And I don't, and then there's, all these other terminologies, eudaimonic, de-demonic, whatever, all of these ways that we can define happiness. For me, listen, it's a personal endeavor. You define it for yourself. And I do believe it is the ultimate goal.
I had in college, you probably too, the opportunity to study post-war Soviet countries where you would think happiness was completely devoid
Yeah.
of the daily life, and yet, yeah, people work these crappy jobs, but then they found some beauty in culture.
Of course. I mean, look at a country like Israel that's constantly under attack. They are
Right.
always one of the highest countries for happiness levels. And that's because of the culture. That's their cultural, the drivers that happen inside of their culture. They're highly connected. They have huge belief in friendship and socializing, which is one of the primary drivers of happiness, right? Which is, they're a country that literally deals with existential threats on a daily
Yeah.
basis, yet they are ranking way higher than America on the happiness scale.
Go figure. Well, it's been born into the culture that was started 70 some odd years ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I wanted to ask you about vibe checks. That one trends a lot on LinkedIn and in other places. Let's go. I got to do a vibe check because I'm not face to face with Jessica,
Yeah.
and I need to kind of see how she's doing. I got to read her vibe. Has that has that been effective, or has that been something that just feels, pop
Yeah.
culture-y? And what are your thoughts?
So I think that um, I'll start with the good and then I'll go to the bad. What I think it is good for is it serves as an opener to a more important conversation.
Okay.
So if it is the beginning of a conversation about how you're feeling and what's going on and a realistic photograph of what's happening in the team or in the individual's life, then I'm all for it. If it's a vibe check where you're like pretending to check in on somebody, you're giving them 30 seconds of your time where they say, yeah, I'm fine, it's all good. That's what I will say absolutely not to. So I like it as an opener. And if that's something that starts to prompt more interesting conversation, then I'm all for it. If it's a one and done, absolutely not.
So I like that because I think a lot of people would be tempted to say, okay, I'm checking this off. I did the vibe check. And that
Exactly.
person might be surface acting positivity when in fact they're crumbling. You would not know that unless you probe deeper and
Yeah.
maybe got in the same room with them to read the
Yeah.
nonverbals.
Yep.
Okay, so we breezed through this. I wanted to ask you about your origin story. You've always been like sunshine to me. I don't know what it is, but anytime I'm engaged with you on Zoom or on a show like mine or in just through our commentary on LinkedIn, you just have this sunshiny attitude. And I'm wondering, where does it come from?
That's really funny. So I don't think that I'm all sunshine, but I appreciate the compliment. Um, I'm a big believer in what I practice. What I
Yeah.
preach, I try to practice. Now, that doesn't mean that I am successful at it all the time. In fact,
Right.
yesterday I had a pretty crappy day. Uh,
Me too. Yeah, I got it.
but I do believe that this is how much I believe in my work, right? And how much I have spent. Like, I really am one of those people who created their dream job, right? I call myself
Mm,
a happiness expert. That's not really something that like you major in college per se, right?
mm.
That's not something that people put on their like their what's it called? You know, when you do the oh God, the mat. I'm really showing my very non-woo-woo trait right now. You know, like they do those mood boards, not mood boards, manifestation things. What's it called?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, but anyway, it's not
I'm
something
old.
that you would put on there as an aspiration, but it is something that, right? I've created my job, right? I've pulled in all the things that I love, in order to have more happiness at work. So I'm a big believer in practicing what I preach. So, for example, there's one step in my book that's all around progress. And it's this idea that in order to have satisfaction, contentment, whatever we want to call it, at work on a daily basis, you have to know that you're making progress.
Mhm.
This one speaks to me very clearly, right? I am somebody who is sort of obsessed with the notion that am I living up to my potential? Am I doing everything that I could possibly doing? And when I feel I am not, is when I will start to go down a deep, dark rabbit hole, right?
Mhm.
So, this idea of progress, building in small wins or whatever that looks like for you, is a critical piece of my happiness on a daily basis. And something that kind of took me a little while to actually figure out. But that's something that I really, for me, taps into this idea that I really need to feel that I'm living up to my potential or what I believe my potential could be.
I am so glad you stated all of this because for some of our viewers watching this, they're probably wondering, okay, so I can still have shitty days. I can
Of
I can still
course.
go I can still go into the depths of despair.
Of course.
Gosh, I look back on this October 2025 nearly daily for me, and yet, Jess, I found a way to reframe for positivity to
Yeah.
make me to find something that brings beauty into my life that makes me happy.
Right.
Last weekend, I told you we had a show. It went really well. But you want to know what really made me happy? It was the text message from my daughter. who is in nursing school. And she wrote me, and this is the exchange. She said, "You're going to hate what I'm about to say." And I wrote back, "What are you talking about, Darren?" She says, "I worked 12 hours in an ER yesterday.
Oh,
I
wow.
loved it. I loved it." I wrote back, "Well, you're an adrenaline junkie. Of course you loved it." She goes, "No, Dad, it's more than that. I feel like I can actually help people when they really need it at the
Yeah.
worst part, the worst moment of their lives." She dealt with people who had suffered heart attacks and strokes, and one poor guy who had suffered exposure for a couple of days, and he came in at 86 degrees, which is really critical. I wouldn't have the metal to do this,
Yeah.
but she does. Oh my God, the joy from that.
Yeah.
The happiness that created for Marcia and me at that moment, that lasted for days.
I know. That's a good one.
That didn't come from my work. That didn't come from my daily grind,
Right.
but it sustained me.
Well, and the thing that's interesting about that also, and I'll bring it back to your daughter, is
Yeah.
like once she found that for herself, while she's getting that feeling of purpose and contentment and happiness at work, that's going to spill over into her entire life, right?
Right.
That's going to give her whole life meaning. She leaves the ER and she still has that feeling with her, right? She goes food shopping, she still has that feeling with her. That's where
Right.
I say that all of this is a blurred line. The book is called Happiness Works, right? Because it's all about happiness at work, but it's really happiness in life.
I am so glad you finished up with that. We've wrapped this up. I got a couple more questions. The first one is for somebody who's just discovering Jessica Weiss for the first time. Where do they find you on social media and engage with you?
Yeah.
And again, tell them where to find this book.
Yes, yes. So you can find the book anywhere that books are sold. So Amazon is usually the easiest place.
Right.
You can certainly find me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I am also on Instagram. My name on Instagram is the Jessica Weiss. And ultimately, all of this lives on my website, which is www.jessicaweiss.com.
That's easy enough to remember. Okay. Well, I was hoping to go back to the answer that you provided to our question, what's your work fit? But I wasn't able to get that recording to work properly. There was some technical issues. I'm going to use this opportunity to ask you again, Jessica Weiss, what's your work fit? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes the work that you do a wonderful part of your day, doing many other wonderful and meaningful things? And here's the important part: it's not the all-consuming time suck of a day. So what's your work fit?
So my work fit is, I think, the answer that I just gave you to the previous question, which is because for me, that's the driver on a daily basis. Like if we're just going to look at a very daily basis, day to day, what is my work fit on a day to day basis? It's this idea that I'm making progress, that I'm moving forward, that I'm accomplishing something, exactly what you said, that I didn't spend my day answering emails or jumping from Zoom to Zoom, right? I actually made progress. I did something meaningful, whether it's small wins, whether it's an accumulation of wins, but it's that idea of making progress on a daily basis.
I am thrilled for you and the year you were about to have. And from one former first-time author to another, I wish you great, good success and wonderful ink. May you get a
Thank
lot of
you.
publicity out of this, because I am really looking forward to that book's arrival. I've already pre-ordered it.
Oh, thanks, Dan.
Jessica Weiss, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.